Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier again with another In Focus podcast episode. And every guest is special, so we do have a special guest today. And I'm going to let her introduce herself. And if you've followed these podcasts, you know what I'm going to do next. So, guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Alison Wells. I am originally from Trinidad and Tobago, but I live here in New Bedford. I live and work here in New Bedford, Massachusetts. I own an art gallery in downtown New Bedford, Alison Wells Fine Arts Studio and Gallery. And I am an artist and an art educator. I'm a painter and a mixed media contemporary painter. So thank you for having me here today, Ron.
You're welcome. Alison, just for the record, and people are just listening to this, but how do you spell your name?
Oh, with one L, Alison.
Okay, and your last name?
Wells, Wells.
Okay. I always ask, like, as I said, people who listen to this podcast already know what's coming up. Have you ever had any difficulties with your names? I mean, I had a great time with Fitz Carmel Lemaire. He told me some stories that it's really sort of funny.
Not really. Well, people always spell my name with two L's because that's, I guess, the most popular way.
Right.
But yeah, not really much of a problem. It's pretty straightforward.
That's good. Of course, if we were in Rhode Island, I think they have more spellings of Lisa than any place else in the country for whatever reason. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Anyway, Alison, I don't know where to start. So let's start back home in Trinidad. A lot of artists can absolutely remember eerily in a way, wonderfully in another way, the exact moment when the light went on in their head and they said, "This is what I want to do for the rest of my life." Did you have one of those moments?
No, because I was always creative. I'm from a very artistic, creative family, so they've always, encouraged that. Me and my sisters always were very creative. We all are in the arts of some form. And my parents always used to say, like, I don't know where they got all their talent, but it was so funny because they were also very talented, just naturally. They always say, where they got their talent? But I was from a home that, it was natural. My sisters were in the performing arts, even visual arts. My father, I always remember, he's an engineer, but he could always draw so well. And I'd be like, "Oh, Daddy, draw me draw me an elephant." And he would just sketch it. And my mother, she was a stay-at-home mom, but she also eventually became an entrepreneur and had a plant business because she loved plants. And her business boomed. And she was like designing rooms and stuff with plants for weddings, for malls, and especially like Christmas time when they have functions and stuff. So, I was from a very creative home. And so I always would paint or create. And in school, I wasn't very academically inclined, but I was artistic and I was known like for my art. Like I was a rock star in school because I was a good painter and drawer, and I would get awards and whatever. So I always knew I wanted to be an artist. But something happened, and I tell the story every time. Something happened when I was around age 13, when I was in high school, and I was in a class, and my teacher asked everybody what they want to be. And I say this story a lot, especially to my students, because it's such a learning experience. Of course, I held a grudge on my teacher, but as time went on, I understand the whole thing. So she asked everybody what they wanted to be. Everybody said the right answer, which is a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, whatever, you know. And then I go and say, I want to be a painter. And she was just like, her face dropped. She just didn't understand what was going on. She was like, what do you mean? Like, you're going to paint and then sit on the side of the road and sell it? And I'm like, yes. She's like, you're going to starve. And like, she shouted at me and she pointed, you're going to starve. The whole class roaring with laughter. And I, you know, like tears welled up in my eyes. I couldn't believe what was happening. And so, you know, at 13 years old, you know, you have a rep to protect. So I'm like, nobody's going to see me cry. And I just laughed along with it, which is, you know, pretty sad, you know, but I protected myself and I just laughed. And I was like, ha ha ha, like, you know, just kidding. But it was funny that from that point, that whole dream of becoming an artist died. It was stopped abruptly. So as I got older, so, you know, I get older, I graduate from high school and it's time, all my friends are applying to colleges. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to apply to? Because all my life I want to go to art school. And I'm like, I cannot go to art school. I mean, I'm going to starve. Like, that's all I heard. I hear this teacher all the time. And it didn't matter if my parents and my family supported me. All I heard was this teacher I looked up to saying, you are going to starve. And it scared me. And so I didn't apply to art right away. I was thinking maybe I'll get into an English program. Maybe I would get into something else. I was thinking what I can get into that's still kind of creative. And then one of my art teachers actually said, well, she knew of a school, an architecture school. What about applying for architect? So I'm like, ooh, that's artistic, but it's still a job. And, you know, like my teacher wouldn't think I'm going to starve. I can make money, you know, whatever. So I applied to architecture school, get in. But at the same time, I was applying to different things. So I applied all over. I didn't hear from different places. And I actually did apply to an art school, but, you know, that was just on the side. I still didn't want to go. So I go to architecture school and I hated it, hated it. We had to do stuff like physics, building science, and I was awful at it. I mean, I was just, it was bad. But there were two subjects that I just like, boomed, like I got A's in it because you had to do this one mandatory art class. So I was like top A's. Drafting, I was good at drafting too. And you know, when you do the elevations of the building in full color, and I was A+. I was great at that, building models. But then all the other technical stuff, hated it. But I was so afraid to tell my parents because they were paying money for me to go. And I was just like, oh no, what am I going to do? I hate it so much. And I don't want to do this. And so as you believe, and like I tell people, like I believe in like the universe, the power of attraction. And that summer, so I did 1 year of architecture and I was planning to go back for my second. I'm going to suck it up, right? Mm-hmm. The summertime, I'm home and all of a sudden I get a letter in the mail and it's an acceptance letter to a school, an art school in Jamaica that I applied for a scholarship. And I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and the school in Jamaica is Edna Manley College for the visual and performing arts. And so I'm like, oh my gosh. And it was almost like the answer I wanted. I wanted to get out of that architecture school and do this. And so I spoke to my parents and they were always very supportive of what I wanted to do. They were like, if this is what you want, your heart, go for it. And so I did. And I spent 4 years there and I loved it. I learned so much. I got my undergrad degree at that school. And then I came home back to Trinidad. So that was in Jamaica. I came home back to Trinidad. I had got honors, you know, I felt good. But I came home and then something happened again. It's like, I have to find a job. And it's like, I can't do art. my teacher's voice came back again. You're going to stop. So I went to art school, but what am I going to do now with the art degree? You're going to stop. You need to get a real job. So that was stressing me out. And I tried different things. I worked in a bank. I worked here. I worked there. And then I eventually worked in advertising. And I didn't like that either. I mean, I was a graphic designer for a while. So, you know, it was still creative. But everything was so fast paced. Everything was due yesterday, you know, and clients would be like, They want something out of the box, out of the box. And then you give them something and they're like, change this, change this, change this. And next thing you're back in the box. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to drive me crazy. And so I did graphic design in the advertising industry. I also did some production and marketing. And so it's funny that today, when I look back, even though I hated those 4 years of advertising, working in advertising, it comes in so handy now as a professional artist and an artist that has her own gallery and business, because I know how to market myself. And it's like, I didn't even realize that I was learning that. So it almost like the universe made me, I had to go through that to help what I'm doing now. And in life, we see that so many things we look back and like, why did I do this or what? But it was a stepping stone for something that was now. So it's just a little story about, I was constantly denying. No, I didn't want to go to art school. Then I went to, so the universe threw a scholarship right in my lap. And I mean, I applied for it, but I applied for it a year before and I heard nothing. And so all of a sudden, a year after, out of the blue, I get the scholarship. Like for me, that's a sign, I am taking it. And then I deny myself, oh no, I'm not an artist. I do all these other jobs. And, and also at that time when I was doing advertising, I just came home from Jamaica and I was home. I went through this other thing that artists do, especially when you after school and you don't know what to do with your art degree. You start questioning yourself, like, am I even a good artist? Like, I went through this whole thing. It's like, I can't even paint. Like, it's just the sabotaging. And I did not paint for 10 months, 10 whole months. And it was just like dream, like, when I'm not creative, it sucks me dry. But I was like, I don't have any talent. Why am I even doing this? My teacher said I would stop. Why is this coming up? Not doing a thing. And then one day I went to an art exhibition opening. I would still go to art exhibitions. And I met this lady, and she was the president of the Women in Art of Trinidad and Tobago. And she said, she introduced me to the thing. And she's like, oh, you just came back home. That's wonderful. Why don't you join our group? And I said, well, I haven't really been painting. I haven't painted in 10 months. And I really just lost my art mojo. And she's like, join our group. We do lots of fun things. We go on trips. We paint outside. We have discussions. We even have a yearly exhibition. And actually, that's coming up in 2 months. And you could, start painting again and be in the show. And I'm like, huh? So I just felt, again, that was thrown in my lap. I'm like, this is a great opportunity. So I cleared a space in my house, set up a little makeshift studio, and started to work again. And it felt so good because I had a purpose of what I was doing. I had a purpose to work again. So I just went through, and I did 4 paintings, medium size, because they said about 4 or 5 paintings. I did 4. And the opening came, and it was wonderful. I sold 2 of those. I was meeting people in the arts industry in Trinidad, and it just felt so good. So it's like revitalized me all over again, So those are just a few stories. Like, I feel like in my life, like, I know people who said, I've always wanted to be an artist. I've always wanted to go art school. But that dream had died in me at 13. And I fought it, like, from 13 years old, all through my adult life, fighting being an artist. No. I'm going to starve. No, I'm not going to do it. Something else just drops in my path. I cannot ignore it. Again, no, drops in my path. The same thing with teaching too, because my mother always said, oh, you'd be a good teacher. You should teach. When God gives you a talent, you need to share it. That's what she said. And I'm like, what? I don't have any patience to teach. I am not teaching. Again, the same thing. The way my first teaching opportunity came was it just dropped in my path. They needed a teacher for high school in Trinidad. And I'm like, I was so terrified. I went for the interview and got it. And then I'm like, yikes. I was like, because you're a good artist doesn't mean you're a good teacher. But something happened when I started to teach at first class. It just like welled up in me. Like, wow, I love this. It was like, this was the first time like I found a profession I could get paid, but I'm talking it, I'm living it, I'm doing it. So it's not like I'm going to the bank during the day and I'm working, and then I'm trying to work in the studio, because that wasn't happening. Even in even in when I did advertising, I'd be so drained and spent. I come home, I don't want to go in the studio. But something about teaching art, I still wanted to go in the studio, and it was like an extension of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand because it's so parallel to my experiences. I was given an assistantship at the University of Miami, and the chairman of the department came in and said, "I have some good news and I have some bad news. Which one do you want?" And I said, "Well, I'll take the bad news." So he said, "Okay." Jim Wilson, the instructor I was supposed to assist, he was a glassblower and he would go every summer to Italy in Florence. He says he's been diagnosed with cancer and he can't come back home. He has to do his treatments there. And I said, what could possibly be the good news? He said, you're taking over his classes. And
Wow.
I said, I've, I've never taught a class before. So, my ex-wife, my wife at the time, said to me, she was always very pragmatic about things. She said, well, why don't you just teach the way you were taught?
Oh.
So I walked into the classroom and I said, well, here we go. And I assumed the personality of Alma's dad, Herb Cummings. Okay. And I walked into that classroom and yes, what a rush. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I said, if I had to make a choice right now to stop painting or to teach, which one would I choose? I know it sounds crazy. I would prefer to teach because you said the word extension is this incredible extension. And I guess that's why you want to get back home so fast to your
Yes.
studio is because as you teach, you learn.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's a phenomenal. Is the teacher that put that horrible beast in your brain still alive?
I'm not sure. And it's so funny because my mother always tells me, Alison, would you just let it go? Stop it. Like, and I have let it go now. I do tell the story because I feel like it's a good story to tell, especially young people. And I actually have forgiven her because I really didn't think she did it on purpose or to hurt me. Maybe she could have said it a different way so it didn't embarrass me like that. But and maybe I needed to hear it, so it gave me that edge to fight harder. While so I always feel like I have to prove myself. I have to push it a little farther. I have to make sure it happens. And
Yeah.
sometimes we need those kind of adversities to give us that extra push.
And
People always said, "Oh, I wish she can see you now. Look at what." But I know I don't feel that way. Like I feel like I need to show her whatever, because I felt like it was done in a way that it benefited me in the long run.
yeah, she probably did it out of love or concern for you because she
Yes.
had no idea what it was. But in an
Yes.
odd way, and
Exactly.
and
Yes.
since your life worked in such weird tangents,
Hmm.
it's probably the best thing that could have ever happened to you
I
because that thing
know.
stayed in your mind all the time.
Yes,
What was
I
her
agree.
name? Would you share?
Oh
Would you?
no, I don't want to
No.
say.
Okay.
I've forgiven her. I don't want to say her name.
Okay. I have a
But
very
but we all have stories like that.
yeah.
I also have a story in college, in my undergrad, that a similar thing happened. It was in a different way though. So it wasn't so it was from a professor. So he was an artist. So it's not he's telling me I'm gonna stop, that's separate. But it was a way of just kind of stunting me a bit. It's like, whoa, that was strange. So and this was so I'm in Jamaica, and he was one of my favorite professors too, and I learned so much from him. And one day, so I'm this kind of person. So I went to a visual and performing arts school. So a lot of my friends, were artists. There were different departments, but there was also the performing departments like dancing and music and stuff. And I remember as a student, when you don't have much money, and some of my dance friends and theater friends were just like, oh, I'm so broke. I haven't had any money for food and blah, blah, blah. And like when I would get broke and I didn't have enough money, I would sell my art. So, and I've always been like that. Like I've always been this entrepreneur, like busy. And I remember like I would sell little paintings. I would do up little stuff and sell them to friends, parents, and stuff. And one day, I was hanging out at a friend's house, and his father was an art collector. He had the most exquisite collection of paintings, local paintings, Jamaican, Caribbean, etc. And I was just in awe and looking at it and looking at it. So my friend introduced me to the father, and I'm like, well, I'm an art student. And he was like, really? I said, yes, and I sell my work too. And he was like, oh, well, I must see some of your work. So one day he came and I had a few pieces out, and he bought a piece from me. And that was the first time I saw the piece. I was so happy. And I got money that I could, use as a student, food, living, etc. And I just felt this was such a rush. I'm like, I love this. If I could keep on selling paints, and this is, wow, this is great. So time goes on, months go on, and I'm in class with my favorite professor, and he was hard. He was a hard-edged guy, right? He would tear your work off. You remember those days? Art professors would tear your work from the wall, and they would just be like, "What is this? This is rubbish." I mean, could you imagine doing that now? You like get in so much trouble. So he one day, so we're there. He comes into the class, boom, boom, boom. It's a big guy, and he's like, we were ready to start, and he looks at me and he's like, why is it that I go over my friend's house for a dinner party and I see your work on the wall? And I'm like, so when he says that, I'm like, oh, you mean Mr. So-and-so or whatever? He's like, yes. So I'm like beaming inside because I'm like, I'm sure he's gonna big me up now. It's like, this is huge. Because when I looked at the work on the wall, my friend's father, the collector, my professor's work was on the wall too. So I was so pumped that my work was on the wall with my professor's work. And he looked at me and said, why don't you learn how to paint first before you sell your work? And I was devastated. He said that in front of the whole class. So again, humiliated. And I just like shrunk. I was so mad. I remember saying I was going to the bathroom. I ran out. In those days, we didn't have cell phones. So I went to the pay phone and called my mother. And I was crying and shouting. I'm like, could you believe that? So it was funny, but so I just like, if a student had come and told me that, I would be so happy for them. I would encourage them like, wow, but you have to think of things. So now I've forgiven him too, but I've looked back and be like, well, I would have not done that and embarrassed a student. And I would say, congratulations, that's great. That's the first step. But don't get too bogged down with selling your work because you're still learning, or something like that. Because I think that's what he was trying to say, because I could understand that. Because if you like, oh, I'm selling my work, you're not even trying to, further your knowledge because you're doing stuff to sell. Exactly. So you wouldn't want to get caught in that rabbit hole. And I think that's maybe what he was trying to say. But it really devastated me. But these things helped me as a teacher to be very careful with my words and how I address my students and how I encourage them and stuff like that. But that was another story of a professor or a teacher that, is like just totally floored me at the time.
Yeah. I believe me, I think we've all had those people in our lives. The old-fashioned pinball machines, and they've got what they call the bumpers. The ball bounces off those bumpers as it's coming down.
Yeah.
Those are those people. You either bounce off of them towards something better, or you go into the hole. And yeah. So going back to selling that painting, and you said you've always been able to sell work. Do you separate your work between what instructors called bread and butter work? In other words, this is the work that I make for the market because I know people like it, I enjoy doing it, but it's not my real work. My real work is something else altogether. It's more serious, it's more expensive, whatever. Do you have those two categories in your life in your practice?
No, I used to. And I don't see anything wrong with it at all. Once it doesn't go away from where you really are, what you really want to express. I think as time goes on and I get more and more people who like my work and follow my work, it's more authentic in terms of they want that stuff that's coming straight from my heart, And so now with my gallery, because now it's like I really had to find that balance because I'm not just an artist doing my thing, doing shows, selling, but now I have a gallery, and a gallery is a commercial place, and I need to make sales, you know?
Hmm.
So what I found that helped me a lot was I can still do the work that represents me. Like, you know, I have the series of my totem woman, which is a strong, you know, woman, or maybe even my series of New Bedford, or you know, like I have certain series that come straight for the heart, and some of my fully abstract pieces that explore other formal elements and stuff like that. And I still all do all of those things from the heart. But what helps me with the commercial side is like making cards, making prints. So these are more accessible to people, and they're more commercial. Like my print rack is so beautiful, but all my paintings are on little the card rack. I mean, little prints of cards. So
Hmm.
it's in this little beautiful gift set that, you know, you can get a pack or whatever it is. And so that's more the commercial element, and the prints on the print rack. But I think that helps because then I don't have to feel like I need to do something different. You know, there are times around Christmas time or Mother's Day or whatever that I may do some small things that are fun to me. It's not like the work that, you know, I think like deep ideas or what I need to express. But there might be like one year I started to do these flower paintings on small canvases because I bought flowers from the farmers market, New Bedford farmers market. They made me so happy. And I think it's important for artists to have a little outlet where they do things just for joy. And it's, you know, so I was just doing it for fun. I did it to give my mother a Mother's Day gift, small little flower, and it came out so good. And I just started to do these quick paintings of these flowers I bought at the market. And then I started to sell it. And, you know, they were going fast and they're small. So they were reasonably priced and whatever. And they went. So I would call them kind of like commercial pieces. And I started to do more of it. And I don't see anything wrong in that. But I never lose sight of the work that comes from the heart, the larger pieces, the ones that I want to make a statement about.
Yeah. Now, I got a couple of things. Could you please tell us about Trini Indians?
Trini Indians.
Yes, Trinidad Indians, Eastern Indians,
Okay.
from they call themselves Trini Indians.
Okay.
I have a friend of mine who is a Swami who is from Trinidad. His accent is spot on, exactly like yours. I had some of my Indian students who were also Trini Indians, and it was like Indians in Trinidad. But I'm looking, I can see your work behind you, and that's what's so great about doing these Skype things because I'm in your place,
Right.
whereas before you were in my place in a studio,
That's
right?
true.
So my question is, could you tell us about Trini Indians, what you know about them, and have their culture
Mm-hmm.
inspired or influenced you in any way?
Yes. So, the history of Trinidad, you know, we had slavery, and after emancipation and slavery was over, indentured Indians were brought to Trinidad straight from India, from the southern part of India, and we call ourselves all of us call ourselves Trinis, you know, a Trini person. It doesn't matter what race or whatever.
Right.
And so we have the African culture, we had the European culture because of the European colonizers.
Right.
And so we had European, we had African and Indian, and then other cultures came through as the years went by. But these three cultures are very strong in melding a melting pot of Trinis, of Trinidadian culture. And the Indian culture and the Indian cuisine, oh, it comes in so many ways. Like the cuisine is amazing. We have roti, which is a curried, we have curried meats and potatoes and different things, and you wrap it in a type of naan, a type of bread, but it's a thin bread, so it wraps almost like a burrito. So it looks like a burrito with curry inside.
Mm.
So the cuisine is amazing. There's this food, and it's a breakfast food, but it's savory. And you buy it, it's a street food. You buy it on the side of the road. It's called doubles. And again, it's like it's a sandwich with chickpeas in it, curried chickpeas. But the bread part is a naan, a very soft, floppy. It's not even like the roti. It's very flimsy and floppy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two of them. That's why they call it doubles. And they
Mm-hmm.
just slap it. It's on a piece of greaseproof paper, like parchment paper. They
Mm-hmm.
put the two little. It's a soggy kind of bread, and they slap the curried chickpeas on top. It's delicious, and you put pepper sauce or whatever. But you see things like this, and this is like not only Indian homes, Indian heritage homes that are making this. Everybody is making this throughout the country. When I grew up, I mean, I know so much about. I met some Indian students at UMass Dartmouth, and actually at UMass Dartmouth they celebrated a Hindu festival of light called Diwali, or Diwali, as some people
Yeah.
say. But in Trinidad, that was our festival. I wasn't from Indian heritage, but we used to light diyas on our back porch. And a diya is a little clay bowl with a wick with coconut oil in it, and you light the wick. And you have a few, and we would just light one for each member of our family. But when you go in some of the areas in Trinidad that have Hindus that celebrate this is their culture, their religion, we would take drives and go and see, and they would have hundreds of these diyas lit, and they would bend like bamboo and put the diyas on top. So you have all these creative, like an installation of lights. It's such a beautiful thing, even to this day. I mean, I haven't seen it in Trinidad in ages because I live here. I've been living here for 15 years, and I go home at Christmas, so I miss it. It's in October. But I felt so much at home when I was at UMass Dartmouth, and they did, because they have a huge Indian department, the Indic
Yes.
department, and they
Right.
celebrate Diwali, the festival of light.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to those festivals, full spread of Indian cuisine and the diyas. I mean, it reminded me of home, and it brought me way back. So the great thing is that we have all these cultures, and it all comes together as one part of a Trinidadian culture. And as I said, it's Creole. Like we have Creole is African and European mixed, like how the Cape Verdeans would speak a Creole,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not just the language. Like when I say Creole in Trinidad, people are like, oh, you speak Creole? It's like, no, it's actually the meaning of Creole is African and
Right.
European mix,
Right. The
combination.
patois.
And then you have the Indian influence in that.
Right.
So we have just so many things that we do that we don't even realize. So many things have influenced it, you
Mm.
know. So and a lot of some people do separate themselves and see it as this or that or whatever, but it's all a melting pot of Trinidadian, because even like the curries and stuff and the Indian dishes that we have are still very different to the ones in India. So like even
Mm.
like the Indian restaurants you go to here, many of them are from like the northern part of India. And so they use more yogurt and stuff like that. So it tastes a little different than the curries that we have at home.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I believe that the Indians that came to Trinidad were from the southern parts. And so the cuisine is a little different. It's spicier. And
Right.
they use different spices that come together.
Right.
But it's
How,
funny
how
that how every home makes it.
how has it affected your art, in directly or indirectly?
Oh, I think in the colors. Well, we always say the Caribbean sensibility of colors, the bright colors, etc. But I always remember growing up and seeing Trinidadian Indians doing their traditional dance, traditional movements, their prayers, their whatever. And I always used to feel a little jealous of it, because I felt like they came as indentured laborers, and they were allowed to still have their religion. They were allowed to still have their culture. And I'm not saying, the indentured laborers are still treated really bad. It's almost like
Right.
slavery, not as bad, but at least their identity wasn't taken away.
Right.
And so I must say the Indian community in Trinidad has held on. There are many who are, Christian and whatever, but there's some who have held on to that traditions. And I love it, because I would love to see, I even did an traditional Indian dance class in Trinidad, but the costuming, I mean, a lot of glitter and glam, a lot of bling. I love bling. And we have carnival in Trinidad, and I feel even that, people may not think of it, but the contributions are so great in all of the cultures in Trinidad that come together, and we don't always realize it. Like even I remember finding out like the history of, like we have a dance in Trinidad for carnival. People whine. It's like, the pelvic area, and you swirl it. It's called whining, right? But the wine is different to other parts of the Caribbean. And people were saying, well, it's almost like it's the Indian influence of the dance that contributed to this. I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about, and some people
Yeah.
don't see
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how cultures can infuse, and we don't even know that it's happening. So I definitely think it has infiltrated its way into my work.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't see it separate as, in the Indian culture. It's a Trini culture. It's a Trini
It's
culture because all
it's
these cultures come together as one.
yeah.
And
It's
as you just,
minestrone soup.
what's
It's
that?
it's minestrone soup, to use another culture's
Yes.
mishmash of things. Yes.
Well,
Yes.
we have a dish called callaloo, and it's actually like callaloo bush is like a spinach. It's a green leafy um green, and we boil it down with okra. It's an acquired taste. Um, it's delicious, but because it has okra in it. We say okra in Trinidad.
Yeah.
Okra,
Yeah.
it makes it slimy. It's a slimy dish.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. It does. Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
have different things in it, So it's like callaloo. It's a callaloo, meaning a mixed pot,
Hmm.
because you have coconut milk in it. Sometimes you might put crab. There's crab and callaloo.
Hmm.
So we always say, oh, it's like a callaloo. It's a mix up of
It's a
things.
mixture. Yeah. 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 Um, so how did you come? I remember when I first was conscious of you, you kind of made a splash, and you were doing collages, I think it was back
Uh-huh.
then, right? How did you come to here? Everybody has a journey story. How did you come to New Bedford, of all places?
I know people always ask me that. Well, it was UMass Dartmouth that brought me, and
Okay.
it's so funny because I always tell people this. I got into UMass Dartmouth. I went to do my master's degree, and it was a 3-year program. And I said, but they allow you to do it in 2 years. I said, I'm doing it in 2 years and getting out. The laugh is on me. I'm still here 15 years later.
You always end up doing the opposite of what you intended to do.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's life, and you just have to take it like that. And as I'm getting older, I'm learning how to just go with the flow and just really accept, put out what I want there, and accept the different things that are coming. Because you can't just be hard and fast on what you want to do, because things are going to change. Yesterday I had an interview, and I said that, my mother, when we were young, used to say, if you want to see God laugh, make plans. And that's exactly all of us are experiencing that now. I mean, how
Yeah.
many people made plans for 2020? My 2020 was planned out month to month, week to week. It was precise. And look at us now in
Yes.
20, right?
Yes. Yes. It is. It is. It is rather strange. What? Okay. Well, number one, you're in Trinidad.
Mm-hmm.
How did UMass Dartmouth CVPA, College of Visual and Performing Arts, even get on your radar from down there?
Okay, so back to the stories I was telling you about. So after teaching dropped in my lap, I'm teaching at this high school, a prestigious all-girls high school. I loved it there. I was teaching art and design for 4 years. And in the third year, I went to some function and I saw my professor from Jamaica, from the school I went to. And this is the same professor who like embarrassed me in a class, but he's still he was my favorite professor, because you know what? He spoke his mind always. You always knew where he came from, and he was not going to BS you at all. So I always trusted his judgment. And so I saw him, and he's like, "Oh, that's good. Did you teach him? So why haven't you done your master's yet? I don't understand you. Why haven't you done it?" Like he was scolding me. I'm like, I've always wanted to do it, but it's just like, it's expensive for me to go and do it in America. Like I looked at some of the tuition. He was like, that should never keep you back from doing that. Apply. There are different things you could do. You can get scholarships, you can get whatever. And he says, I actually know a professor from a place called UMass Dartmouth, and he's Jamaican.
Really?
Yeah. So he says, call him and, find out because, there are different things. And I know that school gives uh, like a stipend, like they pay for your tuition. You can teach there. And since you're a teacher, you can teach and, find out more and whatever. So I call up this professor and he tells me about the program and he tells me about teaching assistantship and whatever. And this is what you do. So I leave it and I'm like, wow, that was interesting. It's so weird. I just meet my ex-professor. He tells me, he gives me a link and just like that. So, but I still applied to other places. But UMass Dartmouth really stood out for me because of that teaching assistantship, the paid tuition, and you got an opportunity to teach. And that was huge for me to teach at the college level because I was teaching high school. It scared me. It really scared me. But sometimes you have to do the things that scare you.
Yes.
So I put in the applications or whatever, and I got accepted to a few places. But UMass Dartmouth was the one that was giving me a better ride. And I'm like, that's great. And I'm looking it up. And so I'm like, I'm going to do this. And so I deferred. I got accepted that year, but I deferred it for the next year. And that's what brought me out. And I came to UMass and I taught. And they said it was a teaching assistantship. And they call it that. But it was full-time teaching. Like
you were
with a professor.
You were the instructor of record.
I was the instructor. So boy, did I just get thrown into the deep end.
Yeah.
But I already had the 4 years experience of teaching at high school.
Yeah.
And in Trinidad, we have our high school is a little different. It's the British system. So we have 2 years. It's optional. 2 years after you graduate from high school. 2 years, which is an equivalent to the first year in college.
Yes.
And I taught those 2 years advanced art students. So I felt like I was ready to teach at the college level. And it really just went seamlessly. But that's how I got here. It was just so serendipitous. It's just the way that I meet my ex-professor. He's like, why haven't you done your master's? And I'm like, I can't afford it. And he was like, don't be not, call this person, talk to them, And the professor I spoke to just really, he was passionate about what the program and what they do. And it sold me. And it was just so funny how things just, fell into place after that. Yeah. As soon as I put the thought out into the universe and I'm like, this could happen. This would be nice. And I started to dream about it. The ball just went rolling. Yeah. Next thing you know, I'm here in New Bedford at UMass Dartmouth, experiencing my first winter. I'm being like, huh?
They used to be worse. Yeah. They used to be quite worse. So what was your Caribbean woman, Caribbean artist coming up to the great Northeast? What were your, I don't want to say your expectations, what were your experiences in that first couple of months when you were up here?
Okay, so when I arrived, I remember arriving at night. The international department at UMass was so helpful, and they hooked me up with somebody there to arrange to pick up and everything like that. And so I got dropped off at the Comfort Inn. You know where that
yes.
Like, still open, but on Fons Corner Road. So I was staying, I booked there for like 2 days so that I have time to look for apartments and stuff like that before school began, because school was beginning the next week. And I remember getting into the hotel room, and I remember the lights were still off. Like I put on one of the lights, but it was still kind of dark. I had 2 suitcases with me. That's all I traveled with. I sat on the edge of the bed and I cried. I was already an adult, a full-grown adult. I was like 31 at that time. Sat on the edge of the bed and just cried. And I'm like, what did I just do? I just upheaved myself from my home, my culture, my family. I'm close to my family. I just come to a place foreign that's a different country, different culture, different climate, because already I come off the plane. It's August. It's the end of August, and I'm cold already. So I'm like, this is not looking good.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what did I do? I sold my car. I got rid of my apartment. I got rid of my independence. left my job at the high school that I thought I was just going to teach there for the rest of my life. I was happy teaching there, doing some exhibitions, selling, work on the side, blah, blah, blah. And I just really upheaved my whole life. But I like to tell that story to students too, because I say sometimes things that scare you, just have to take the leap, you know? And that's why in my mind, I said I was coming back home in 2 years. So that was scaring me. And then I started school, I started teaching, and it was different. It was difficult because I had no family, no friends in this area. I knew other people in other states, but I was very alone. However, I always said New Bedford has been good to me. Like in the community, the professors were great. And everybody, the students were amazing. Everybody opened their arms to me, invited me to their homes. I'm like, these people never even knew me. Like, we are very private. Like, you know, I'm from a private family. It's like people were just opening their arms and inviting me in for like nobody would allow me to stay home for Thanksgiving. I couldn't believe that first year I had like 8 invitations from professors, people in my classes, my friends. And I remember the professors were all taking care of me. Like when winter came, one professor bought me one of those space heaters for my for my studio.
Yeah.
Someone else got me a jacket. Like people were just like, "Are you okay? Are you warm? Stay warm." Like the Trini girl who was like, my jacket was all thin. I'm like, I didn't even know, like, you know, I went to Savers and got a real like winter coat, but I didn't know like what real winter coats are, and I was still cold. So, but it was so nice. So even though I felt like, you know, out of my element, I'm in this totally different place, and you know, I have a different accent, so I'm calling attention to myself, and like all these things, you know, it was just made me feel like stand out. I still felt welcomed. And
Well,
maybe it might have been different if I just came to work or came, you know, whatever. But in the school setting, in the art setting, I'm with other
yeah,
artists, art professors, you know, we're talking the same language. So even though I'm
right.
different, I have an accent, I'm from a different place, I made a family really quick.
And that's what's so great about the community. And the other thing too, Allison, is it's your personality.
Oh,
It really, no, seriously, it really, really is. You have this phenomenal personality, and I think that has, so much to do with it. So here you are, and we're going to wrap this up. We're coming down to the end of our time. Here
okay.
you are. I mean, I can equate slightly, being a northern, a New England boy going down to the subtropics in Miami. When you said, coming here in August and you were cold, I remember being down there in July and people would say, "Is it always this hot down here?" And I said, "No, we haven't gotten to August yet." And that was like my second year, because I remember my first year I could perspire sitting in a chair.
Oh my God.
It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
horrible. It was horrible. But here you are. You have your gallery. What is it you don't want to do? Because we know that's what's going to happen.
Boy.
What is your future? What do you think the future holds for you? Yeah,
Huh.
and based on your past, like I said, what is it you don't want to do? Because that's what's going to happen.
I know. I really don't know, but as I get older, I'm allowing it to just unfold. You know, I'm doing what I have to do. I'm painting, I'm teaching, I'm doing what I love because I can't see myself doing anything else.
Hmm.
So I just have to see what all of this is going to unfold. If I have to close, I close and I go again and I just keep going on. If not, that what a blessing. And I do it. And I'll have to decide what I want to do. And you know, we all have to reinvent ourselves at this point. And I think it's for the better. You know, right now I'm working toward a solo exhibition at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. So that's taken a lot of my time. I'm focusing on it, and it's enjoyable. And you know,
Hmm.
you have to see the good things in adversity. So this is a time where, you know, it's uncertain, especially for a lot of small businesses, and it's an uncertain time for me as well. But I'm seeing the little things that I can be grateful for, and I'm actually grateful for uninterrupted studio time. So I'm
Yes.
loving
Yes.
being in the studio, doing my stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm looking for these things. I really don't know. I used to have a plan, but now I'm just like, okay, with what happened right now, we're just going to go with the flow and see. And I'm just gonna keep chipping away piece by piece, doing what
Right.
I love and seeing
Yeah.
how everything works out.
Yeah, there's Serenity Prayer that primarily most people know it from Alcoholics Anonymous, but it is so true. One day at a time, one moment at a time, and then it's the surrender. You just surrender to whatever that force is. And with me, I've always been mesmerized by the feather in Forrest Gump. Some people think it's a stupid movie, but one of my
No.
favorite movies is Forrest Gump.
Mhm.
Just to see that feather. And sometimes I wait for a signal from whoever it is, because, I went to Catholic school, and my belief system has changed somewhat, because um, I just really believe that there is no, and bear with me, there is no God. We are God,
Mhm.
because we are all part of this consciousness, and the good and the bad all is all rolled into one. So that's what's so important. Alison, if you were to move back to Trinidad, um, and this is the last question because we're wrapping it up. If you were to move back to Trinidad, what is the one thing that you would like the people here to remember you for the most?
Oh, well, my contribution in the arts, in the New Bedford arts, because I pride myself in being part of something bigger, a group, and which was the reason why I stayed in New Bedford after I graduated. So I said I was going to do a 3-year program in two and leave. I ended up doing the full 3 years. I needed the 3 years proper thesis work. So there, my plans changed. And then after, when I'm thinking of leaving, this great renaissance was happening in New Bedford, the arts again. I mean, New Bedford has a strong history of the arts with Swain School and everything. And so I'm learning so much of the history, and I've become, because I was a student, I just think that I was able to just kind of be part of it. I
Mm,
didn't just come. There's some people who come from out of town or a different country, and they always want to say, "Oh, this is what New Bedford needs. This is what, and let's change this." And people don't like that. New Bedforders hate that. Because I came in a student, I came in a kind of a lateral way. I was accepted and loved in the art community. And so when I graduated, so many good things were happening. I didn't want to leave at this point. And a lot of artists were doing that at the time. Instead of just come in, get their degree and leave, they would come and stay and get affordable studios and start doing community works, and everybody's together. So if I leave, I would like that people would remember my contribution in a small way, bringing my culture, bringing what I knew, assimilating it to the culture of New Bedford, what we know, and just people telling me just the way I see things. So even like I would do a series of New Bedford, and even the work that I'm doing for the Whaling Museum is about New Bedford, and the show is called In the Neighborhood. Even like the colors and stuff, people say they see my Caribbean identity coming out, and I don't plan for it to happen, but it happens. And so I would like people to just remember that my little contribution to the area and to the art community.
excellent, excellent. This is wonderful, Alison. And I tell everyone that this is not a one and done. This is your only shot at a podcast. I would like to invite you to come back as many times as you'd like, because everybody is not just a page. They're a chapter. They're a volume in the history of the city. And also, when you return, things are going to have changed. You're going to have a new body of work. So there's so many different facets. Alison Wells, thank you so much. This wraps up another episode of the In Focus podcast. And with that, thank you so much, and we'll see you again.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.